I met with Nicole last night and got her story. And I think if you pay attention to this issue in years to come, she is going to have a prominent role across the nation. She is going full steam ahead. She is just getting started. She is getting her PhD so that she can actually be a researcher and be recognized in this area. It helps spread the word because what she told me was, I want the mothers to know. I want the mothers to know how to safeguard their children. She didn't want any family for that to go, what they've been through, with the heartache and the loss. And so, also, Charlie, we've got Nicole Allen, her son was Hart, and we've got Charlie Brunt. Charlie was one of the best friends that Hart had. And so they are going to present to us. I don't think we need any more introduction. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for this mission that you all want for educating others. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah, for setting this up. I appreciate it. I am very involved with the Boy Scouts in Atlanta. I'm a huge fan, and Charlie Brunt started our Boy Scout or Cub Scout troop at our school when he was little. And he's been all the way through, and it came up where he was looking to start doing his Eagle project. And we, all the boys have an opportunity to sort of do whatever they want to with their project. It has to get approved and all that. And I told him if he wanted to do something about it, he had a partner. And so he said, is that good? So we're working together. This is the first time I tried to do this. Second time for me. And I hope is that he's going to do this 4 more times somewhere around Georgia, different lakes. If anyone wants to introduce this to someone who might want to hear the message where they are, that'd be great. Charlie, was a role model for Hart. Hart was 13 when he died. It turned these couple years ahead. I had a 16-year-old daughter, Charlie's grade at school. So I've known Charlie the whole way through. But he was a role model for Hart, very kind to him. And they both got elected to the Honor Society of Scouting called Order of the Arrow together last May, about a year ago, actually right now. And that was Hart's last camp out. So I'll set the stage. Hart was had just finished 7th grade. We live in Atlanta, Georgia, and 2 of his very best friends. He was invited to the lake with another family, and this is the family of this best friend, and his other best friend got invited too. So it was Hart died. I went through his desk, and I found an essay he had written in 5th grade. Now he's died as just after 7th grade, but as 5th grade, he wrote an essay about the first time he'd gone to his family's house. And what a ball he had. He ran through the house, he went up the stairs, they looked at all the rooms, they went down to the s'mores, fireplace and had a ball checking everything out and had a great time, went out the lake every day and went tubing and fishing and swimming and paddleboarding and couldn't wait to go back was like the last sentence in the essay, which was, was hard to read. Not promising on a Friday, but so he was invited to go out to the lake again this particular weekend, a year ago almost. We almost didn't let him go because my husband was turning 50, and it was his 50th birthday. My son died on my 50th birthday. And I was down in Orlando with my daughter for a volleyball tournament, and we decided to let him go because he loves video games. He loves, but he plays a lot of video games. So it's a very lenient mom. My attitude, as long as you do what you're supposed to do, you get your grades, are good, and you advance the scouts, and for a good person, knock yourself out. But if we had an opportunity to go off video games, and let me tell you, going to the lake, going tubing and fishing with 2 best friends, easy way to get them out of the house. And so my husband and I talked and said, let's just let him go to the lake and celebrate birthday and stuff. And so we let him go. And so that night, Saturday night, 10 o'clock at night, the boys, I'll set the stage. There were 6 teenage boys on that clock that night that he died, these cows. The mom was very hands-on. She was there the whole time. She was taking pictures, sending to me and the other mom the whole time. And so, I had pictures of him before he died. Very active. And they had gotten out to the lake on Friday. They had been swimming all day on Friday, out on the boat all day Friday, tubing, paddleboarding, fishing, whatever. Saturday morning they got up, coming out, like tubing, fishing, whatnot. We were not there, of course. And then Saturday night, they sort of finished up with the boat. They were just kind of paddleboarding. It was dusk. They had eaten dinner. So eventually, the mom and the grandma were on the dock, and they were like, "Okay, let's get a little dark. Let's on in." And so there were two paddleboards and three 13-year-old and a 16-year-old place up at Lake Blue Ridge. There's the Double Dare dock. They were up there, whatever, doing what I was terrible to play music, whatnot. And the three younger boys, 13-year-olds, were in the water. And they were paddleboarding, two paddleboards, three boys. So when the mom said, "Okay, it's time to come in," there were only two paddleboards, and they ran two of the boys out of the paddleboards and rode them into the shore. My son, who was on the paddleboard, turned around and swam over the dock. And so what happens is when you're electrical on a dock and electrical current runs into the water, it runs out, and Charlie will get into this, that goes out of concentric circles, right? So you start to enter the electrical field, and all you really have to do, what you should do, is just go around and go the other way. You feel it, right? But a 13-year-old wouldn't know that. Probably most y'all didn't know that. I would have known that. But Hart kept swimming and to the ladder. And the mom was noticing that he was acting funny in water. And he was bobbing up and down. She didn't know what was going on. And she just was watching him. He swam over the ladder, and he grabbed onto the ladder with both hands, and he never lifted his head above the water. And the mom said, told her other son, "Hey, Hart's acting weird. Go get your friend. I'll stand a minute and get him out of the water." So her son starts to swim over to get my son, and he starts getting shot. And then the other buddy starts going over and trying to save my son, and he starts getting shot in the water. Then the mom, realizing that something's happening, she jumps in the water. Right? She grabs onto him with both hands. She goes in the water. She blacks out. She sinks. So meanwhile, you've got these young boys, trying to save a 13-year-old boy. Two other 13-year-old boys have moms in the water. It's chaos. You've got grandma on the block. And then you've got these 16-year-old boys. So I got a call at 10 o'clock at night for my husband, and he said Hart had been electrocuted on the dock. And my father was 26 years retired Air Force. I grew up on Army bases and Air Force bases, and I'd never been on a dock. I didn't know they had electricity on the dock. I thought that it was like on a boat and pull it up, and there's a big roping. We put it on mooring posts. I didn't know that there was these boat lists that people have. And so I was very confused about why there was electricity in the water. So the problem with electric shock drowning is, and what you'll see with all of these people who have died of electric shock drowning over the last 25 years, is that a life jacket is not going to save your life. The electricity is going to kill you, or it's going to be a combination. My son was not wearing a life jacket, but the electricity hits you, immobilizes you. Charlotte's going to go into this in detail, and then you lose all muscle control. You have to hang on, or at first you're hanging on to some metal, but if you weren't going to hang on to some metal, you'd still lose all muscle control and sink. Weren't wearing a life jacket. So either electricity outright kills you, or you sink in the water. It's a combination of both. But there are lots of people in this. Lucas Ritz died in 1999. 8-year-old. He and his family lived in the Seattle Sound area on a houseboat. When they finished their homeschooling on the boat, they would jump. All it takes would get off their boats and put their life jackets on, dump them in the lake and swim around for play, for recess or whatnot. And same story. He separated from the other guys. He's wearing a life jacket. He swam over to get out, entered an electrical field. His mom was standing right there, jumped in and tried to save him, but he never went underwater. He was wearing a life jacket. And he immediately got killed. And his father, Kevin Ritz, and I are speaking in Vegas in June for the National Fire Protection Association, who is the one that writes the National Electric Code, which is just adopted by most. Charlie will get into this, but a lot of states adopted, and organizations, power companies adopted, local counties adopted as the code, and it becomes law, and it is law, majority. And we'll get into that. But in any case, Kevin and I are presenting at the National Fire Protection Association's World Expo Conference Center or whatever. They're talking about how 25 years later, people are still dying. 25 years later, and that doesn't even count all the ones we don't know about. And it doesn't count the ones who get hurt. So I was speaking with someone here in the audience, and I won't call him out because he doesn't want his name to be identified, but he was telling me about 10 years ago, there was a man who had the same situation as I did. He was on the dock with his kid, and his kid was struggling in the water. He had touched the boat lift, the metal boat lift. He was drowning, was getting electrocuted, couldn't let go, and they managed to save him, pull him up on the dock, give him CPR, and he's alive today. Could have not been. I spoke with John Buchanan, the Georgia Power guy here, and asked if he'd heard of any instances. I told him that as far as our list goes, that there's nobody that's died on this lake of ESD. But he said that over at Lake C, that there have been some stories of people who are, feeling tingling in the water. Shouldn't feel tingling in the water, guys. I mean, if you're feeling tingling in the water, something's wrong. You gotta fix it. One of my good friends has a lake house at Chattanooga, and he told me Hart grew up with him and his family, and when he told me his lake house is electrified, and he had just bought this house from this other guy, and after Hart died, he was like, "Oh God, I better go make sure I've got everything, ready to go." And so he fixed it, and then we were chatting about it. He's very proud of himself, thinking all the safety mechanisms we'll talk about today, which is great. But he's like, "Yeah, there's this one screw. Every time I touch it, it shocks." Now, I haven't. Like I said, my father's retired military. We never had an electrician in our house. We never had a plumber in our house. But I beseech you, if you are the do-it-yourselfer, that's great. Save yourself $2,000, do it all yourself, and then pay some licensed electrician. That's his job, bread and butter. Pay him $300. Check it out. Just make sure it's good. And you're good. You save yourself $2,000. But anyway, this is just a semblance of a few pictures of the, 100+ people who have died of ESD that we know of. So when Hart died, I started looking into this, and I was like, I don't understand how this happens. I could not have told you how a light bulb works. Partly, I had been told you how a light bulb works, but now he can, and I can. I started learning as much as I could about, and I'm not, trust me, I know what next to nothing knowledge to see, but both I wanted to know see frankly. And so I started trying to research this and talk to everybody. I found the Electric Shock Drowning Association, which is a nonprofit comprised of people who have lost their children and their loved ones over the last 25 years. They started this nonprofit, and their goal is to educate. And but I realized that there's so many reasons why this is not being identified. And part of it is that, and I won't go on to belabor this point, but when someone dies and they identify the cause of death, how much death they're going to get, they have to choose between drowning and execution. There's no way to identify that as electric shock drowning, which means you wouldn't have died if you hadn't been electrocuted and fell in the water. And the people who get electrified in the water are categorized as an ESD, even though they never went in the water. Charlie will tell you a few of those cases. But in any case, when I started my PhD, I applied for a PhD program last fall to study epidemiology, which is a study of diseases and illnesses and injuries coupled with biostatistics. And the reason I'm doing that is because somebody has to pay attention to this. Somebody has to bring it. Someone has to figure out how often it happens and why it's happening, where it's happening. Is there a correlation between the places that follow the NEC code and the ESDs or not? Like, is that correlated? I don't know. I'll polish now in a couple of years. But one of my first days of class, I read this quote, and it really made me. And it was just essentially saying that, this is y'all's community, and you guys, what you do, where you are living and playing, affects your health a lot more than a lot of other things that you probably do, right? Maybe you're taking a multivitamin. Maybe you make sure you eat your greens. Maybe I don't know, but you guys are in control of each other's health, and a lot of your health is dictated by where you live and who you spend time with, where you play. It's up to you guys to keep each other safe. And I'm just here to sort of share with you some things that you might be able to do. This is the last text I had with Hart. He got the light on Friday night. The day before that, I had taken him to a bear badge clinic out at Scotland in Northeast Georgia Council, and I had wanted to learn I had made him an exercise with his friends, and he went up and did the automobile maintenance bear badge. So I wanted him to know the basics, right? We came back and left for the lake the next day. And this is the text I sent because I'm a mother, and I know that kids are supposed to wear a life jacket. It's on the nose. And I knew to warn him about that. But what I did not know was that the dog had electricity, that you should swim around the dog. You know to tell him that. And I want you guys to know And I want kids to know that it's a danger. And I want to be out there to slow the bird and say, look, we know that we're supposed to put our babies to bed on their backs so they don't die of SIDS. We know they're supposed to be in car seats, so they're safe if they're cars. Have to be in a booster. They're not supposed to sit in the front seat until they're a certain weight or whatever it is. But we don't know this. I didn't know to warn my son, and it's killed me as a mom. Let's see. So, what's the plan for this presentation? We're going to just inundate you with information and what we know, and there's a lot we don't know, and I'm not an electrician, I don't report to one, but I have a handle on what we can learn together and what I can get you started on. You can. And I want to ask, when you leave this presentation, I want you to think about this picture, and I want you to ask yourself, if you would do this, would you get in the bathtub with a toaster that was plugged in an electrical outlet that had a GFCI on it? Would you let your kid do it? Because that is what you are doing when you get in and swim around a dock that has electricity. That's what you do. Same thing. You're relying on your electrical grid to keep you safe. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And that's assuming you have the electrical grid and the GFCI in place, which you may or may not. So what you ask yourself, one thing I want you to walk away with is, would I do this? All right, so now I'm gonna let Charlie take over. And he's gonna walk you through some of the technical pieces of it. He's done a lot of work studying about this. He's gonna tell you what he knows and open up to questions and answers that we may or may not be able to answer. But we're gonna do our best. So thank you for being here.
All right. Morning, everybody. Thanks, Alan, for listening me, and thank you all for coming out here on this great Saturday morning. My name's Charlie Brunt. Some of you may know me. I'm a sophomore at Pace Academy back in Atlanta, and I've been doing scouts since I was in first grade, and I've been working over at LaPrad's for the past 3 years, and I'll be back over there this summer. So, and I'm here to talk to you all today about electroshock training. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start with what electroshock training actually is, how and why it happens, how can we protect our loved ones and each other, and then we're going to open up to questions. So what exactly is electroshock drowning? Electroshock drowning, or ESD, is what occurs when a human or animal or any kind of living thing is submerged in water, specifically fresh water, in the presence of an electrical current. So depending on the amperage of the current that's in the water, certain things can happen to your body, ranging from a tingling sensation all the way up to lack of muscle control and even cardiac arrest if it's high enough. And so it really, just for context, it only takes 10 milliamps of current to render you completely immobilized in the water, no muscle control. Whereas it takes 500 milliamps to power a single light. So just a fraction of what it takes to power a light bulb is going to render you completely immobile in the water. And low conductivity water, or fresh water, is the real danger, because humans are basically these vessels of salt water, which is much more conductive to electricity than fresh water. So electricity always takes the path of least resistance, so it'll go through us to get wherever it needs to go in the water. Whereas if you were in salt water, it probably just had an easier time going around you because it's much more conductive. So the physics of a dot where a fault has occurred, as Alan was saying, it behaves like a gradient. There's concentric circles. So the closer that you are to the fault, the more amperage it's going to be in the water, the worse off you're going to be. So the best thing to do in these situations is to swim as far away as you can. But electricity can travel up to 150 feet in water. The main cause of electroshock drowning in general is any type of electrical fault that occurs, and in combination with the lack of or failure in safety measures in place to prevent the leak of electricity. So this here is a simple diagram that I made. It shows positively charged electrons powering a load and negatively charged electrons coming back to the source. It's a closed circuit. Now, if a fault were to occur in this, then electricity would start leaking out of the circuit, going anywhere where it needs to get back to kind of home where it started. So this is a more kind of detailed version of the previous diagram, where power is coming from a junction box to power a boat lift, but a fault has occurred in the motor, and the electricity is leaking through the lift kind of into the water. So this is really one of the big causes of electroshock drowning. So danger can lurk anywhere from marinas to your own dock to even fountains and even little kind of lit pools. So if you have a pool with lights on it, it can happen there too. So I'm just going to walk you through a few examples. So this case, which happened on the Lake of the Ozarks, when a brother and sister were swimming in between two docks, when a fault occurred on one of the docks and the electricity jumped from that dock to the grounding system on the adjacent dock, which electrocuted and killed the children. Because, well, a fault occurred on one dock, so inadequate kind of equipment there. And also there was the lack of grounding systems on the first dock, which kind of caused the electricity to leak out to the second. The second example was in Tennessee, when 10 and 11-year-old boys on a hot day were swimming out at the marina, and a fault happened on a nearby houseboat, and it also electrocuted them and killed them. So in these two previous situations, all the children were wearing life jackets and under adult supervision. So this other situation on Lake Lanier happened when a 64-year-old man was seen swimming near his dock, but they later found him dead. And the authorities had to turn off the power in order to retrieve his body. So the electricity just keeps leaking until eventually it's turned off. And this other scenario on Lake Lanier happened when a victim was swimming at his dock and was seen to be in great distress. And some good Samaritans came on their little boat to try to help him. But when one of them got to the water, they also entered the electrical field and were also in great distress. And the lesson here is that even well-meaning people need to be careful with electroshock drowning, because you can't really do anything to help the person in the water until the power is turned off. And you can't see that there's electricity in the water with the naked eye. It's impossible. So this situation happened at a water park called Splash in the Borough, which some of you might be familiar with in Statesboro, Georgia, when several patrons were reporting feeling shocks in the wave pool. And this prompted the park to close the wave pool for a few days and bring in lots of electricians to kind of verify that everything was working well. And they never actually found a cause to the fault, but they did install some workaround for us. And this last case in Lexington, Kentucky happened when two dogs jumped into the water and were seen to be under great distress. And then a husband and wife jumped in after them to kind of make sure the dogs were okay. And when all of them entered the electrical field, they died. And this is just an example of how even dogs and any type of living thing, including humans, is affected by electroshock drowning. So this is a map that we've plotted out of a large number of these ESD cases. And it just shows that electroshock drowning is not an isolated issue. It happens all over the country, possibly all over the world as well. So what do we know what to do about it? We can consult the National Electric Code, which, as Ms. Allen was saying, is put out every 3 years by the National Fire Protection Association. And it details anything we need to do to kind of keep everything up to code. And in the state of Georgia, it is seen as law, is recognized as law. So this is a map of the adoption of the National Electric Code. So states like Georgia, we're up to date with the 2023 National Electric Code, but recently they have come out with the 2026 code, but it takes about 18 months for the state of Georgia to adopt it into law, and even longer for some places. So we won't see those codes in effect until probably late 2027, even 2028. But if you were to go travel to Kansas or Indiana, they're still on the 2008 National Electric Code, and you were to go swimming off a dock, they might not have updated their electricity in maybe 20 years. And there's huge risk there. And this here is a timeline of the evolution of electricity on docks and the evolution of safety measures that have been put in place as codes. But the big ones to pay attention to are in 1986, when the first documented electric shock drowning case occurred. And in 2011, when the National Electric Code included Article 555, which pertains to electric shock drowning. And in 2017, when that same article was expanded to all docking facilities, not just commercial marinas. So for residential docks, it's sort of a wild, wild west of equipment and codes. Whereas commercial marinas that are regulated by the National Electric Code have annual inspections, they likely have more professional maintenance, and they can be subject to insurance audits. But residential docks can have grandfathered infrastructure. Like if you've ever seen a floating dock out on the water, that's all grandfathered in. Or there's the DIY factor. If you want to save some money, do your own electrical, that's great, but there's also some risk there. There's the lack of inspection. And then there's also the lack of communication about electric shock drowning itself. Not enough people know about it. So how can we stay safe? The only guaranteed 100% way to be safe from electric shock drowning is to not swim by a dock. Unfortunately, that's really the only way to do it. So here are the highlights from the National Electric Code Article 555 that pertains to our docks, with the first one being for signage. So here we're giving out signs out on the table out there for later, but so this is the bare bones kind of legally required sign for docks. It just details that there's a potential shock hazard and electrical currents might be present in the water. So this is kind of the yeah, minus these logos and then this at the bottom for Hart. And then these two kind of more updated version. This one details that electrical currents may be harmful or lethal. That kind of gives reason for the warning. And then this is to kind of largest encompassing sign, which also has the no swimming. So the electrical currents may be harmful or lethal is kind of a big part of these little ones, because there was an incident at Disney World where a toddler was swimming off of kind of a little pond. And there was a sign that said no swimming, but the toddler went in and the parents kind of let anyway. They just didn't detail what was in the pond. And the toddler ended up being eaten by an alligator. And the family actually sued Disney because the sign did not specify that there were alligators in the water. It really prevented the parents from letting the child swim.
If I can just add one thing about the sign. Yeah, we embellished it with the ESD logo and the phrase at the bottom for my son. But the reason we have this other sign printed up, the reason I'm speaking at the National Fire Protection Association's expo in June is because I was reading about ESD on their website. You know, they had a fellow there that worked for them that he written an art advocacy. And he had a picture of this minus the ESDPA and stuff was hard. He had a picture of this sign and it said no swimming. And I sent a note to the editor and I said, there's a mistake in your article. If you'd like to call me, I'll tell you what it is. And he called me and said, what? There's nothing wrong with art. I said, yeah, it's sign. He had a picture of the sign that said no swimming. And I said, the NEC doesn't say no swimming. It says warning potential shock hazard, electrical current may be in the water. That's what the law says. That's what it says in the code. And he says, well, that's what it means. It means no swimming. I said, no, it doesn't. If you want the law to say no swimming, then it needs to say no swimming. That's not what the law says. But it's funny if you thought that that's what people would take away from it, that they weren't supposed to be swimming. I'm like, heck, you gotta say what you mean, and do what you say. So you may see that next, if I have anything to say about it, be in the next code. But that's not what the law says.
So the other big takeaways from Article 555 are the bonding and grounding requirements, which will kind of bring the electricity back to its source, prevent it from leaking out of the water. And then there's also the requirement for an emergency service disconnect. So the emergency services connect is relatively new. It became a requirement in 2023 for private dogs. And it is basically, it's required to be clearly marked, readily accessible, and a circuit breaker handle cannot be used for this purpose. It's meant to completely turn off all the electricity on the dock with just the push of a button. And here, out there at La Praz, it's just a little diagram that I made. In between the two gas docks at La Praz, there's this big red button that serves the emergency service disconnect for the power.
Show this.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, send on these.
Yeah. So in addition to the signs, we're also handing out these emergency service disconnect stickers that you can put on your breaker box or whatever you have that can alert people to where your emergency service disconnect is if you ever were to need these. So we're also handing out those in addition to the signs out there.
I'll just add something if you don't mind. This emergency service disconnect, I want you to think about Hart because you've got 3 13-year-old boys, you've got 3 16-year-old boys, you've got a grandma and a woman my age, right? And the only person who's owned the home was the grandma. It's her home, right? Now, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot here, but I'd like to know how many wives know where the emergency shut-off is in their boat house. And I hope you do. I have 4 children, or I had 4 children. And Hart, because of Boy Scouts, anytime a breaker flipped in our house, I would have to say to my Boy Scout, Hart, go flip the breaker. And he knew how to go do it. But most kids don't know. And when someone is being electrocuted in water, you've got to be able to turn off the electricity to save them. And people need to know where it is and how to turn it off. So when my son was dying in the water, you get 13-year-old boys trying to run me. It's not their house. They don't know where it is. And, so seconds matter. Someone's being electrocuted in the water. You can't save them until you turn off the electricity. So make it go easy for them. I went down to Lake County a few months ago and I went out to some flowers, $20 million boat. And it spared no expense. But I went on to the building inspector and I asked him to show me the setup. And I said, okay, where's the emergency setup? And he said, we walked up to his dog, it's a beautiful dog. And he says, right over there. And I said, okay, where? And there's this huge hydrangea bushes, huge garden, right? And I said, over there? He's like, yeah. So I climbed through my hydrangea bushes, get over there. And then there were 4 boxes sitting there. And I said, well, where's the emergency shelf? And he said, it's in that box. And I said, well, what's that box? I said, well, that's the cameras. What's that box? Well, that's the irrigation. Well, what's that? It's something else. So he's like, it's a silver. I heard. So like, where the shop? He said, well, you just open the door. So then it's down here and I'm up here. So now I have to get on my hands and knees and open the metal door. And then there's 8 breakers. A little Sharpie next to it that says what they are, right? And I'm like, which one of these is the shut? And he says the bottom left. See right there, it says, shut up. And I'm like, so someone's dying in the water and like getting electrocuted. And a 13-year-old boy, maybe the one who's tasked, or some other adult who doesn't live there, who doesn't know where things are, right? I mean, plan for that scenario where the person who's tasked with turning off the electricity does not live there, and maybe a kid, and have it be clearly and visibly marked and accessible. I get it, because rather you want to come with the hydrangeas, when push comes to shove, you want to be a little easier. So we were handing out these signs for free. They're outside. The law says you're supposed to post a sign at each entrance to your dock. So that would mean if you're walking up a ramp, there would be a sign warning people of the potential shock hazard. And if someone was coming up on a boat, they would see that too. And I've been standing here telling you today that if I really believe, and I know Jack's here against my son, I'm curious if Jack would do it, but if my son was a scary cat, if he walked up on a dock and he'd seen this sign right there, we stopped to distract, and he would have turned to the mom and he would have said, are we supposed to be swimming right here? And then maybe something else would happen. Maybe they would have turned off the electricity. And they've been like, okay, let's turn it off. Maybe that was something. I don't know. But I know this would scare him and he'd be alive. So I feel strong about it. parts.
And so this kind of list here is we've compiled are these dock safety components. That this is a conversation for you to have with your electrician. These are the best ways for you to bring your dock up to code so you can be as safe as possible. The best way to do it. And I think that y'all will be getting an email about it at some point, I think.
Yes.
And kind of the last step in this is community cooperation. Big value. So for communication, do we all want to agree to turn off our electricity when we're not using it? Yes. And do we want to discuss kind of bringing everything up to code at a certain time? And we, of course, want to educate the people that weren't able to make it today, unfortunately. And then we're handing out stickers for our service disconnect outside. And then we're also handing out the signs as well. Do we all want to agree to have all these things? Keep everybody as possible. And then, well, the beneficiary for this project, which is the Electric Shock Grounding Convention Association, will step down a little bit. They were a nonprofit founded in 2011 by Kevin Ritz and Elise Lutrick after they both lost children to electric shock grounding. And they're kind of the lead kind of authority on electric shock grounding since. And the ESDPA has awarded a certificate of appreciation to the Lake Brunt City Association for hearing us today, letting us educate you all about electric shock grounding.